Hi everyone and welcome to In Deep Geek Live. We are just 3 days away from Game of Thrones Season 8. And so this is my open Q&A live stream, just answering all the questions you've got. And there we go with it. It's just me today. So I've got, as usual, a whole load of questions from my patrons to work through. As usual, if there's any super chats, we'll get to them straight away, and I'll try and pick up as many questions as I can from the chat as we go through. I'm going to try and keep this one to 2 hours today, but let's see how many questions we can get through in that time. Just before we start, I wanted to say a very big hi to my wonderful moderators who I've got a full complement in there today, I think. So thank you so much for all the fantastic work you do. But let's get straight into it. I had a couple of super chats just before we got started, actually. We had one, Jack Hurst, thank you so much, saying, thanks for everything you do, Robert. Can't believe Season 8 is just days away. I know, it seems to have been a long time, but we're finally there. Maura Lee saying, thoroughly enjoying the machine stops on the well-told tale and looking forward to all of the Season 8 content live streams, starting with the one on Sunday. Yes, so I'm going to be going up to 2 live streams a week as of this week. So it's going to be a pre-show live stream every Sunday. I'm going to be doing one at 10 o'clock my time. That's 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 4 hours before the show. I'll keep that again to 2 hours so we can, everyone's got a chance to go away, grab a bite to eat before we watch the episode. That one I'll be having a guest on each week, but I'll keep the Thursday live streams, I think, probably just for me to answer as many questions as possible. And in terms of the well-told tale, I'm really glad you're appreciating the machine stops. For those who don't know, I'll talk about it a bit more later. The well-told tale is my second channel, and that's the channel where I do audio narrations. I do audio narrations of my favorite science fiction and fantasy stories, classics of the genre. And at the moment, we're doing something that I think is probably the most underrated and unknown science fiction masterpiece out there, or one of, certainly, E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops, which we're now 2 parts in. There's 3 parts in total, and I'm really glad you're liking it. Anime lover Nicole saying, have a nice stream, left a question on Patreon. I'm going to use you as a lullaby because I'm really tired and you have a great voice. Thank you so much. Well, if you are going to go to sleep, then we'll get to your question quite soon, I think. So let's start off with, we had a few questions. Anime lover was one of them over on Patreon, asking sort of different versions of the same question. So Anime Lover was saying, which dead characters that died in Season 7 or before or will die in this season do you think we will see in the Army of the Dead? Who do you hope to see? I kind of hope to see Carsey, who was the spearwife from Hardhome on Hodor. Fran Pouch also asks, who will we see as whites? Thinking about Hodor or Jojen, Jeor Mormont. Maura Lee is asking also about who I might find upsetting to come back. For me, I think that this is quite open. I think that it's very clearly something a lot of people are now expecting, is that we're going to see some familiar faces in the Army of the Dead. I agree. I don't think that the showrunners will be able to resist the temptation to show us a few faces that we recognize. I think Hodor would just be heartbreaking. I think that there's a very good chance we're going to see him there. I think that there's a very good chance, as this is going down into Winterfell, that some of the characters who didn't die north of the wall, but perhaps some of the characters who are buried and are currently lying in the Winterfell crypts. Whereas in the books, I think that the Stark Dead will be raised through the Horn of Winter to fight on behalf of the living, as it were. I think that on the show, there's a very good chance that the Night King will raise not just some of those who have died in the battle that we're going to see inevitably in Season 8, but also some of those perhaps in the crypts. If you were watching, I think it was last week when I had Sansa Snark on from the Night's Watch, Night's Cast, sorry, she was exploring the idea that perhaps Rickon might come back as a white, be raised by the Night King, which I find a horrifying prospect, but it's entirely possible. It's exactly the kind of thing they will do. I think that they will the much trailed battle that we're going to have in Winterfell between the army of the dead and all of the folks who've gone to Winterfell, that is not just going to be a big 60-minute, 80-minute fight scene. They are going to be structuring that with beats of real emotional intensity. And one of those, I am sure, is going to be the people that we cared about coming back as whites. And so I think that if I had to pick one, I think Hodor, Rickon, possibly a few of the other people. I think that the Spearwife, who there was a character, if you remember back to the Hardhome episode from a couple of seasons ago, they kind of focused on her a lot, and then she was raised as one of the people when the Night King was raising a huge amount of them. And I think that that would be a really good callback for them to show her, because we know that she's part of that army. So I think that would be a really good callback. Just going over to the chat, Lana Allen, thank you so much for your super chat, saying, "Hi Robert, one of the first videos I ever saw of yours was where you first explored the Queen Sansa theory. I'm still holding out for that one." Well, yeah, I think this is something that I personally hope that we're going to get to the point where the Iron Throne is going to be destroyed. I hope that's where we're going to end up. I'm pretty sure that's where the books are going, and I hope that that's where the show ends up. If they keep it there, if they keep with some kind of monarchy, then I think the person I would want there more than anyone would probably be Sansa, with Tyrion as this kind of harking back to how the Wars of the Roses ended, this kind of merging of houses Stark and Lannister. So I think that I would love that, and I think Sansa has suffered so much that I think that I would like her to get some kind of fulfillment. But I do think that she could get that just being the Lady of Winterfell. I think that that would also be a good way for her arc to end. But yeah, I agree. It'd be fantastic to see her there, getting some sort of reward at the end of it all. But I think that perhaps the reward is going to be in her gaining peace in herself as much as anything else. Linda Prasuta, thank you so much. Very generous super chat, saying, "Do you think Bran's mark from the Night King will continue to be a problem?" Now, I think this is a fascinating question, because this was really big back a couple of seasons ago. Now, if you remember what happened there, the reason why the Night King could come into Bloodraven's cave was because when they were out on the astral plane, as it were, Bran was just sort of wandering around, and the Night King grabbed him, marked him, and we just got this small bit of exposition there saying, Bloodraven saying, now he's marked you, he can cross over the barriers that we've set up around this place. He knows where you are, he can come and get us. It wasn't made clear whether that was just like a short-term thing, whether that was just applying to Bloodraven's cave, or whether it was something bigger, deeper. I think that there's a fair chance that, as a sort of a logic, that does still apply. He certainly seems to have some sort of a bond with Bran, so he knows where Bran is. There was that scene right at the end of last season where Bran's walked into the ravens, I think they were, as they were flying over, just doing a little bit of a reconnaissance mission, and the Night King immediately looks up and knows he's there. So there's clearly a link still. In order for it to be an actual issue, then I think they need to set up some idea that there's some other kind of magical barrier stopping people getting into Winterfell. They've not done that so far. They've not given the crypts of Winterfell the same kind of mystical depths that they have in the books. But I think that the Night King knows where Bran is. Therefore, the Night King can home in on Bran is going to be quite important, because I think that the Night King, if you saw my video on the Night King and what he wants, and I think I called it How to Kill the Night King because I got there at the end of the video, that is focused around a lot of the idea there that he is wanting revenge for what happened. And if he's wanting revenge, then this means getting revenge on the people who did it and the Weirwood network as a concept as well as individuals. I will explain this a little bit more later because I know there's a video from a question from one of my patrons on this, but I think that yes, the answer is it's probably more about the link between the Night King and Bran than the trying to get past a magical barrier, because they haven't set up yet the idea of there being a magical barrier. But a really interesting question. Thank you, Linda. We had one. LML is in the house. Great to see you, LML. Thank you so much. Usual $6.66. Robert, your voice is echoing back a few seconds behind. You probably have our YouTube window open. Cheers, buddy. Thank you so much. I will just have a quick look at that. I will sort that one out. Hopefully that one is now dealt with. But guys, with and hang on just one moment. What I'll also do, just to make doubly sure, is I'm just going to drop that one in there, and hopefully that one's sorted out. But guys, do let me know if there's still a problem. LML is going on live. I remember LML is going live pretty much when I finish. So guys, if I forget to plug it later on, I hope I don't, but if I forget to plug it on later on, if you still want more Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire content, please do go and check out his channel after I finish. Head on over there. He's always excellent value for money. Had another couple of super chats, I think. Let me just quickly flick through. Captain Anopheles has helpfully spelt it out phonetically for me. Will Qyburn raise an army of not quite deads to fight the quite deads? I think yes. I think that he is. I tend to call these science whites rather than anything else. We have to view the mountain as being a prototype, and there was that wonderful moment where when they're in the dragon pit and they were brought the white there and everybody was looking aghast at it, and afterwards Qyburn picks up the hand and stares at it quizzically, and I think that is just a little bit of a nod to the fact that he has not finished his research. I think that he is going to be creating an army of science whites, or attempting to create an army of science whites, in order to be defending King's Landing. Whether they are going to be defending against the quite deads, as you put it, I don't know. It might well be against the survivors of the Battle for the North when they come south. So that's certainly another option. Because Cersei's plan, we should probably clarify, is not to go north, is not to be fighting the army of the dead. It is to hold back, to solidify her gains in the south, and await whoever emerges victorious. So they will be weakened, and that's her plan. Is that and then she'll be able to take on the weaker party out of either Dany's army or the army of the dead. Donald Peoples, thank you so much, saying the Night King mark may still be a thing. I think that's why we didn't see Bran in the crypts in season 7, to preserve the magic. Yeah, it's entirely possible. I think I would agree. I think that it could well still be a thing, but they do have to establish quite early on that there is some sort of magical barrier around the crypts. They haven't done that so far, and I think that they will need to do that. Don Heim, thank you so much for the super chat. I can't see a question, but do let me know if there is one. People, I think, saying the echo has now gone. Good, thank you so much. I'm glad Glad it's fixed. It may well have simply been me needing to plug in the headphones. And LML, you are indeed helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, let's quickly nip back to some questions from my patrons. So George Khalil saying, in your last video, I did not catch why the Night King would absolutely want to kill the three-eyed raven. This was what I was alluding to just a moment ago. Do you buy into the fact that the Night King may have spared the lives of characters such as Sam and Jon and forced some events like Dragons Beyond the Wall in order to achieve this goal? Okay, so what I was trying to argue in my video was that what we know about the Night King, we've not been told huge amounts about the Night King. The Night King is, just to be clear, a show-only character. It's a character that the showrunners created by their own admission in order to personalize the moment of the creation of the White Walkers. So he is a personification of the White Walkers and a leader of the White Walkers. So that is his role. Now, what we know about what the White Walkers want is connected with their creation. The swirly symbol that they leave places, that is all about them saying, we remember our creation, because that was the pattern of the standing stones at their creation. So what they're saying is, we remember it. And they are trying to tell people that they remember it. And therefore, this is their way of communicating what it is that they're about. And if they're remembering it and if they're coming south, the clear implication is that this is because they're not just wanting to kill lots of humans, but they are wanting some sort of reckoning with their creators. Now, we saw that when they immediately came in, they moved incredibly slowly. I didn't really say this much in the video, but if you go all the way through seasons 1 to 7, it started to become a meme. It was so obvious that the army of the dead were moving incredibly slowly before they breached the wall. They just hung around north of the wall lots. But the one moment when they moved incredibly swiftly was the moment that they suddenly realized that they could break through the barrier and get into Bloodraven's cave. So that was clearly something that they were absolutely desperate to get to. So if we add up all of that, they are very keen to be killing, attacking, having some sort of reckoning with the Weirwood Network, the Children of the Forest, the Three-Eyed Raven. And that's because they are who are responsible for the creation of the White Walkers. Why, therefore, do they want to kill the Three-Eyed Raven? Because the Three-Eyed Raven is a part of the Weirwood Network. The Weirwood Network being this collection of memories, souls, whatever, of previous Children of the Forest and Green Seers and all the rest of it, which includes those who were part of the creation of the White Walkers. So it's not good enough just to kill the handful of Children of the Forest who are still there. They will want to kill the Weirwood Network as a whole, which is personified by the Three-Eyed Raven. So my logic goes that if Bran is now the Three-Eyed Raven, when they killed Bloodraven, that wasn't enough. So that was my logic. That was why I was thinking that the target that we hear about is Bran, because Bran is now the Three-Eyed Raven. He's not Bran Stark. That's just a part of who the Three-Eyed Raven is now. So having taken all of that, the sort of follow-up questions there were, do you buy into the fact that the Night King might have spared the lives of characters like Sam and Jon? I think Jon, no, I think he was just taunting him when he was like doing the face-off thing and sort of raising the dead. Sam, it's entirely possible that they did spare the life of Sam because they seemed quite happy to let a few people, you get the Night's Watchman in the very first scene who also escapes. It seems entirely possible that they were happy for people to know about it. The few bits of about the fact that they were coming because they feel invulnerable. The few bits of emotion we see from them seem to be this kind of cockiness almost. When the Night King does raise everybody at Hardhome, he is doing it in a way that he's showing Jon Snow his power. He didn't have to do that. He could have just waited until Jon Snow had gone and then raise everyone, but he wanted Jon to know what he was capable of doing. So I think this is also, and also incidentally at the in the prologue in the books, then one of the others laughs when they can tell that they can defeat this member of the Night's Watch. So there's a certain degree of cockiness going on there. So yeah, it's entirely possible that they might have let some people go. And in terms of forcing some events, allowing the dragons beyond the wall, yep, I'm not going to go into the whole theory now, but I've mentioned it on a couple of different streams. I certainly see that there is a clear possibility that the Night King saw what was happening in the vision, in the flames that Sandor had, and he was there waiting for a dragon to come. I think that that's a very clear possibility. Let's get back to a couple of things in the chat. Nicola Juracan, I see you've asked a couple of times also over on Twitter whether I think Edrick Snowbeard was the first Night King. I think this is because the picture in the cave painting we saw last season down on Dragonstone had the Night King with a big beard. For those who don't know who Edrick Snowbeard is, he is one of the Stark Kings. We hear him mentioned. He built, I think it was the outer wall of Winterfell, and I think he was also the Stark King when the Wolf's Den was lost down in White Harbor. What those two facts tell me was that he wasn't one of the very, very first Stark Kings. He was one of the middling Stark Kings, which seems to suggest that he probably wasn't in the show world the first Night King, if that makes sense. So I think the answer is no, and I don't think that there's any kind of hint that he is a White Walker or another. He's got a snowy beard. He was involved in actually building up the defenses of Winterfell. So no, I don't think that's the case. As I say, I think we got a couple of super chats. Let me see if I can find them now. So Benjamin Johnson, do you think Melisandre will play the role of Nissa? I think I also had one question. So John Lamb over on Patreon asked a very similar question, saying the Red Priestess Melisandre will have a sword plunged through her heart by Jon Snow. She may be Nissa and bring forth Lightbringer, which may be the weapon that kills the Night's King. Do you agree? So I think this is an interesting one. I think Melisandre will return. I think that there's no doubt about that. I think that Melisandre definitely, her arc is all about what happens in the battle with the White Walkers. It's not about King's Landing, so she's not going to be anything to do with what's going on down in King's Landing. I think that she will live and die connected to this battle with the White Walkers. Now, I think that she clearly thinks that Jon Snow is Azor Ahai reborn, although she thinks that Dany has a part to play as well, and B, she thinks that Azor Ahai reborn needs to have a fiery sword. So I think that yes, she will come back, perhaps with the fiery hand, reinforcements of the worshippers of R'hllor. But I think fundamentally her role is going to bring this fiery sword into play somehow and give it to Jon. Now, in the legends of the original Azor Ahai, that had to be forged ultimately by plunging it into the heart of Azor Ahai's lover. That was what finally tempered the sword, and it finally burst into flame and her life and soul essence went into it. Now, I don't think that that's a very strong analogy across to suggest that Melisandre is the equivalent of Jon's lover. But I think that Melisandre certainly would be willing to sacrifice herself for the cause. So I think that there's certainly something in this. I think that she will bring across Lightbringer in some way, what she thinks is Lightbringer. But I don't think necessarily she will be Nissa. What I think, well, I will say what I hope, and I put in one of my videos recently, what I hope will happen is that she will stand before Davos and he will have the chance to execute her for her crimes against Shireen. But I think that there's a chance that that will actually feel not how everybody wanted it to feel as this kind of great justice, but I think that Melisandre will feel that her job is done by that point, that she has achieved what she wants, and therefore it's actually not a curse, it's she's wanting to die, she's happy to die, it's not a problem. So I think that is probably Melisandre's fate, rather than just being this Nissa character that she doesn't map across to particularly well. Thomas Bingham, thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks for the consistent top content, Robert. You're very welcome. Sanrixian for $20. Thank you. Thanks for all you do, Robert. And thank you for your great art. Anyone who doesn't ever know Sanrixian's art, she's a fantastic artist. We've got quite a lot of them in this community, actually. We're incredibly blessed, and quite often does live paintings over on Alamel's channel and Between Two Weirwoods, his second channel. So please do go check that out. Perhaps one of the mods can put a link across to some of her art in the chat. That would be fantastic. Dwayne Owen II, thank you for your super chat. Love to know your thoughts on the Golden Company. Will they follow the gold, or will they follow honor, Targaryen bloodlines, and the living? Okay, so the Golden Company in the books have got this really big history. They were formed effectively out of a failed rebellion from the Blackfires, an offshoot from the Targaryen family. And they were kept going as a way to keep the possibility that the Blackfires would reinvade and take the crown. They have got a huge reputation. Now, in the books, they then join up with this character who claims to be Aegon Targaryen, the firstborn son of Rhaegar, and they are there in this huge extra plot that has been cut out completely from the show. So I think that on the show, the Golden Company are actually going to be just used as another mercenary group, so to speak. I don't think they're going to go into their backstory, because if you start introducing the idea of Blackfire rebellions at this point, then it will just confuse people. They're going to be very focused in on where they're trying to get to on the story. They're not going to suddenly want to put in a whole load of backstory that doesn't actually impact on the story. So they are largely going to be a rather cool-looking mercenary group. Now, in terms of whether they're going to follow the gold or follow honor, I think that it works for me that they are going to be a mercenary group. Following that logic, they're not going to be trying to go, oh, well, we think that these are the rightful, this is the rightful ruler, or that is, or anything like that. I think that they are just going to be there doing Cersei's will, because the Lannister troops, a lot of them were destroyed on the Field of Fire last season. A lot of them are dispersed across the land. So really, these are going to be the soldiers that are going to be there fighting for Cersei. So I think that's what their role is. I can't see them suddenly turning around and saying, oh, Harry, you know what? I actually think that Jon is the rightful king. We'll support him instead. Sorry, Cersei. I can't see that happening. I think that they're just a mercenary group. I know there's a lot of theories about this, but for the sake of the show, I don't think that they're going to be adding in extra layers of complication. I think we had another. Yes, so Anne Trott, thank you so much for the super chat. I can't see a question here, but thank you so much for the super chat. Chelsea Dye, thank you so much, saying you're one of my favorite GOT content creators. Thank you. I really appreciate that. There are a lot of fantastic creators out there, so that's wonderful. Linda Prasuta, another wonderfully generous super chat. Thank you. I like Mod Mary 1's comment that Melisandre could play the Nissa role due to all her references. Your thoughts? I think I've sort of covered off on this one. I think that Melisandre is willing to sacrifice herself for this because she believes it absolutely, completely and fundamentally. So that bit I get. And I also get the idea that she may say, this is the way that you can do this. You have to plunge this sword into me. I get that. If the show goes down that route, though, it is not a clear echo of the original legend, because Nissa was the lover of Azor Ahai, and therefore that's the point. It was a willing sacrifice to someone that she loved. So I get it, and I like the idea on a certain level, but it would be an imperfect kind of play across from the legend, if that makes sense. Interestingly, although we talk a lot about Azor Ahai and Azor Ahai Reborn within the community, on the show, they've talked a lot more about the prince that was promised rather than Azor Ahai. So they've not said huge amounts about the legend. We've had a little bit, I think, that Tyrion's mentioned it in passing. We've had mentions of Azor Ahai, but nobody's sort of sat down and given out the whole legend and said, well, we're looking for a person who can do this in order for the Lightbringer to be forged. We need to do these things. That's not happened. So I don't think they're going to go into that level of detail there. The book's obviously a completely different thing, but on the show, we have to always think streamlined. They're not going to be adding in lots of extra bits of detail. There will be some, I'm sure, and I will say, think streamlined on so many different things, and sometimes they will deviate off of this, I know, but for the most part, they're not adding in new extra bits of explanation. We have to look back to what have they already told us, because those are the things that they've teed up to be what's going to be important later. Kraken Tacos, thank you so much. Saying Tyrion was shown a map of the tunnels under King's Landing before the Battle of Blackwater. This is how he defended the Mudgate. He might use this knowledge to invade King's Landing, much like he did to invade Casterly Rock. Yes, so after big picture on season 8, the first bit of action, yes, we're going to have Cersei doing stuff down south and all the rest of it, but the first bit of main action is going to be north, with everybody gathered around Winterfell. The situation with the Night King and the White Walkers is going to be probably resolved, or at least on its way to being resolved, when the attention will need to turn to the south and King's Landing. Now, you're entirely right that Tyrion knows how to get into the Red Keep. Tyrion is not the only person who's currently in Winterfell who has got an idea how to do that. Varys knows the tunnels that allow you to get in there. Arya similarly escaped out of there when back in season 1, if you remember, she escaped out of there, climbed down the rock, and then had to come back into the city again and had some trouble with the city guards and all the rest of it. So there's at least 3 characters who could lead a small expedition into the Red Keep to try and hunt down Cersei. Tyrion, I think, out of those 3 is probably not as likely as Arya to be doing this. I think that Tyrion's escapades in doing that were more things that were happening in Casterly Rock, and it's him explaining to people how this how they can do this rather than the other way around. I think it's going to be a lot more to do with Arya, and she will probably, I think the Hound inevitably is going to be going down there, possibly a couple of others as well. So yeah, I think it's. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of people who could be doing that. Johnny Cash, thank you so much for the super chat. Thoughts on Howland Reed returning? This is. I'll stop saying this from now on, unless I say otherwise. I'm talking show. Howland Reed. I would love him to come back. They've not really majored on him in the show. I have to say, I would love him to make a big appearance. There were two possible moments when I thought last season that they might be hinting that he could make a return. The first one was that he actually got named when Mira was coming through the wall from the north, and she said that she was Mira Reed, daughter of Howland Reed. And then secondly, when Mira left in season 7, there was the emotional scene with Bran when he's sort of saying, you know, I'm not really Bran anymore. And she says, I have to go back home. I need to be with my family. If he is going to make an appearance, then it's just going to be as a nod to the fans. I'm pretty sure he might just sort of appear in the background. They've done this a lot with just things that they know fans are interested in, like there was Arthur Dayne clearly made an appearance. The sword Dawn was there. They kind of lingered, the camera lingered on it for a little while. The Horn of Winter was shown again. The camera lingered on it for a little while. It was almost like they're giving a little nod to the book readers to say, yep, we know that this is important, but we're not doing anything with this here because we're keeping it all streamlined. Howland Reed is going to, in the books, is clearly the person who has all the knowledge about what happened during Robert's Rebellion, Tower of Joy, things like that. He will come back and give that information, but on the show, they gave a lot of that over to Bran and to Sam. So I think that his role there is much diminished, so the need for him on the show is limited. So I would love him to. He's one of my favorite characters, but I don't think he's going to have much of a role, if any, in season 8. Me, myself, and I, thank you so much for the super chat. Again, I can't see a question with that, but thank you. Just saying love your vids. Thank you very much. Quickly flick down, I'm pretty sure. And Trout saying, wait, I asked a question. I'll see if I can try and find that question. Perhaps one of the mods could just drop that there somewhere so I can see what that question was from Anne Trout. I have got some more. So, and Adam Dangersmith, thanks you so much for the super chat. Again, I can't see a question, guys. If you are asking questions in super chats, it's a lot easier if they're in that text that they highlight. Otherwise, it's sometimes quite hard to see. But thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. And here we go. I've got $10. Thank you so much, Anne. We always talk about the 3 Dany treasons in the context that 3 people will betray her. But what if she will commit 3 treasons? Blood, Viserys, Gold, Tyrion, and Love, Jon. What do you think? So this is very much a book question. On the show, so for those who are unaware of what we're talking about here, Dany's visions in the House of the Undying way back in Book 2, Season 2, on the show, they cut that right down, and we just get the vision of her sort of walking through the keep, the Red Keep, seeing the Iron Throne and so on. Very cut down. In the books, there's a whole series. She has 20-something, effectively 20-something visions, and a whole load of what seem to be prophetic words over the top. And some of them are about 3 treasons. One for you will experience. Possibly there might be a slightly different word there. One for gold, once for blood, and once for love. Now, these out of all of the things there are probably the ones that are hardest to pick out exactly what they might mean. I like the idea that it might be her doing these treasons rather than people doing treasons to her, but the context of the words did seem to suggest it was treasons against her rather than treasons that she was personally performing or doing. So the idea that Viserys was a treason for blood. I don't think that there was. I mean, you could argue that it was a treason selling her off, but from his perspective, certainly there was no treason. He was the king; he could do what he wanted, so there wasn't a treason there. In terms of Tyrion, a treason for gold, I personally don't think that Tyrion is going to betray her. Or she is going to betray Tyrion for gold in any way. I don't think she betrayed Viserys for blood. I think that yes, she allowed him to be killed, but her understanding was that if he was a blood of the dragon, then he wouldn't have died like that. And then Jon, will she betray Jon? I don't know. That's possibly the more likely one out of those ones, I have to say. I like the thinking, and I love flipping it the other way around. And I think I've got another one, a question. Actually, I'll come to this one now as we're talking about it. Susan Dunkel over on Patreon saying, I know they didn't talk about the three pyres or three fires prophecy on the show, but they have followed through with two of them. Do you think there will be a final pyre for love in the show? So this is another one of the book bits of prophecy that it says 3 fires you shall light, and the clear implication is that the first one was the funeral pyre she lit for Khal Drogo. The second one was the pyre that we see when she lit up the Khals. Get that? It was a couple of seasons ago on the show when she's there and she gains all of the Dothraki, they're all bowing down before her because she burns all of the Khals and she emerges out of the flames. So they did both of those on the show. Are they going to do the third one? It's possible, but again, I don't think they feel they have to. The question is whether or not this is important for the plot. Now, it depends what it is. I think that the tying in with this kind of Nisa idea that there is a theory out there that perhaps if the sword Lightbringer needs to be lit through a sacrifice, then that is creating a fire. Because Dany, although she sets lots of things on fire, most of the time it's her dragons who do it, not her personally. So what we're looking for is something that she personally sets afire. And the last one is for love. Now, the clear implication is that this is something to do with Jon, because it seems to be that she loves Jon. And so if she's going to be lighting a fire for love, then that is something to do with Jon. Do I think that is going to happen? I think probably not. Specifically, they're not going to be drawing it out and saying that this is exactly this is the third fire that she's lighting. So I don't think so, but who knows? I think that at this stage, the nuances of George R.R. Martin's ending are going to be lost, and the broad brushstrokes of the show's ending, which sounds like I'm kind of damning the show for dumbing it down. I don't think dumbing it down is the right way of saying it. I think that they're doing I've used the word several times already, a streamlined version of this ending. And that means we're missing out things that they have cut out. The fact that they've cut out mentions of things like the pyres and the things that she has to ride and all the rest of the treasons implies that they're not going to be dealing with that. So I think that's my broad answer on all of that, is that the stuff that she saw in the books in the House of the Undying, they're not going to be explicitly picking up in the show because they didn't tee that up already. I think I'm caught up on super chats. Jojo Lady Dane, thank you. Just picking up on a question from Christopher Barber. Do you think Dany could be a bastard of Ashara and the Mad King? Daenerys and Barristan Selmy sees Ashara in Dany. Okay, so this is something in the books that Barristan Selmy certainly sees, reflects on the fact that Daenerys reminds him a bit of Ashara Dane, specifically her eyes. Personally, I think that that is just to tee up the fact that he is then reflecting on who Ashara might choose, because he's doing that in the context of who Daenerys might choose to be her lover or to marry, and he's seeing some people saying, well, no, clearly she wouldn't choose that. So that, I think, is the context there. Do I think that Dany could be a bastard of Ashara Dane and the Mad King? Personally, I see zero evidence for it. In fact, that I haven't seen anything that suggests that the Mad King particularly, or to connect the Mad King and Ashara in any way. There's nothing there that it implies it, I think. So I would first of all look for some evidence. In terms of Dany, the main thing that I would come back to is that there's nothing in her history to suggest that the story we're told is not true. Somebody somewhere along the line would have to be getting this wrong, and there would be a conspiracy at huge levels. So she was born on Dragonstone and came across a baby child, and Viserys came across and they were in Braavos. If that's not her, then who is it? Viserys certainly seems to think that she is who she thinks she is. The whole Lemon Tree and Red Door thing, I've done a video on it. If you want to go check it out, it's very clear that they were in Braavos. There's nothing in her history to suggest that she is not who she thinks she is. And she very clearly is very Targaryen. So if you look at her sort of heritage, she's already only about an eighth or at most pure Targaryen, if we say that. If she's actually half Dane, then she's only like 1/16. And suddenly this whole thing starts to crumble, that you get some characters like Gendry, for example, who are more Targaryen than her. So I think that personally, no, I can't see that that's likely. But if there's evidence, always happy to see evidence, always happy to reconsider things if there is some evidence out there. Let's go back to a couple of questions from my patrons. Linda Prasuta, this is still talking about the Night King. If Bran is the key to defeating the Night King, do you think we'll see early on in the show what they have to do to prevail? So many characters will be finding out about his powers. Yeah, so if we're going to have the Night King defeated, then it can't be just a surprise how it happens. They have to have teed it up in some way. I think that they did tee it up already last season, when we had that time when Beric and Jorah and Jon were there pointing at the Night King, and Beric saying, well, we have to kill that guy, and then the whole army goes. I think that's them teeing up this idea that that is how you defeat the army of the dead, is by killing the main man. I think that's how they're going to be going there. I love the idea that somehow they might figure out that you can reverse engineer it and you can remove the bit of dragon glass from him. I don't think they're going to go down there because Bran didn't talk about it. He hasn't mentioned it. We just saw it happen. So, in terms of his powers, so many characters will be finding out about his powers, yes, but at the moment his powers seem largely, in terms of what he's showing other people, knowing stuff rather than actually doing stuff on the astral plane. I would love there to be some sort of astral plane battle between him and the Night King, but I suspect we're not going to get there. I suspect it's going to be a very physical battle, and that they're working out what it is, how it is you kill the Night King. Dracarys Noir had a fantastic question about the future of the White Walker baby and babies. I think that they're replacement bodies for the Night King to live subsequent lives in. I think this is fantastic because it's really interesting that it tells us or shows us how little we understand about how the White Walkers actually operate. What's their culture, and do they age? What's going on? Right at the beginning, we had this whole subplot of them taking babies, turning them into White Walkers. The implication was that those babies would then grow up into adult White Walkers. But we don't know, because we've no idea how long it takes them to age. Are they actually just taking babies who are then, as Dracarys Noir here suggests, they're like staying back at the base, and just in case this invasion all goes awry, they can grow up and then they can have another go again in a few thousand years. Maybe it takes that long for babies, White Walker babies, to grow up. We do not know. One of my big hopes for the season is that we get a little bit more about how that whole thing works. Why was it that this is connecting to what Nicola Jurican in the chat was saying about the picture on the cave painting of the first Night King had this beard. Did he grow a beard? Can they grow beards? Is it a different person? What's going on with the babies? All of that has not been explained. And one of my biggest hopes for the season is that some of it will be. One of my biggest fears is that it won't be. But I think it's a fantastic question simply because we don't know. Someone was saying about Ashara Dane was dishonored at Harrenhal. Yeah, that's the words of Barristan Selmy. Barristan Selmy is a very prudish is probably the right word, person. So when he says that she was dishonored, that probably means that she slept with somebody. So I don't think that means that somebody necessarily raped her or anything like that. I think coming from Barristan, it could just mean that she slept with somebody, she became pregnant, and because he's got a very high idea of what it is to be a lady at court, then that means that he thinks that that's dishonor in some way. It doesn't mean that the Mad King tracked her down or anything like that. Could have done, we don't know, but there's no evidence for it. And I think, incidentally, there is a lot of evidence for Ashara Dane and Howland Reed getting together, but that's an entirely different video you can look for if you're interested. Mod Mary 1, thank you so much for the super chat. Just want to thank you for getting us through the long night. Hashtag Melisandre sacrifice. Yeah, I think the Melisandre thing is going to be fascinating because they did not show us her in the trailers, and I think that may well mean, as with Bran, that she's actually going to be doing something really quite important. They just didn't want to show us what it was. The Dancing Rat, thank you so much for the super chat. I love your insight. Ned sent Lady's body back to be buried at Winterfell to keep her pelt from Cersei. Do you think we'll get to see a ghost Nymeria versus zombie lady battle? Oh, everyone keeps on coming up with all of these increasingly horrible ideas of who might be raised as a white. Maybe I'm going to just go with the fact that the budget seems not to be able to do dire wolves. So certainly last season they didn't do much with the dire wolves, and they haven't for a couple of seasons. If they brought us a zombie dire wolf, that would be amazing, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it. Yes, he did send Lady's body back to be buried in the Lich Yard of Winterfell, which is just outside the entrance to the crypts, incidentally. So they wouldn't even have to go down to the crypts to bring that body back. Terry Smith, thank you so much. Just saying, just enjoying your live stream. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Am I caught up? No, I've got one more super chat here. Cross country with the Bergies, $10. Thank you so much. Hello from the great state of Tennessee. Wanted to get your thoughts. I know Varys is likely to perish on the show. My question is, will he survive Winterfell, or will he die in King's Landing? I don't know is the short answer. I do not think he's going to die in the big battle at Winterfell. What they've teed up, and if in doubt, we have to go back to what they've teed up in previous seasons and just follow through the logic of it. But what they've teed up is the idea that he might, in Dany's eyes, betray her. Now, it's because there was that whole conversation between the two of them, which they didn't need to have. They included it there at a slightly bizarre place after Varys has been serving Daenerys for quite some time, and then they'd arrived in Dragonstone. Suddenly they had this conversation about whether or not he might ever betray her and what she would do if he ever did. And that was centered around the idea of if he ever thought that she wasn't being the queen that he thought that she should be. The issue which is going to be bubbling under the surface for all of this is that the true king, and they're very clear on that, there's no ambiguity, I think, in the show on this one, the true king is Jon, not Dany. Now, Dany, there are a lot of Dany haters out there. I'm not a Dany hater, but we have to accept the fact that sometimes she does say knee-jerk things like, I'm just going to go and burn King's Landing to the ground. That shocked and appalled people like Tyrion, and he had to talk her out of it. And that would also shock and appall someone like Varys, who very much cares for the small folk. If they suddenly realize that there is somebody else who they both know and both respect, who is actually the rightful king, not her, there is a chance that they might, one or both of them, might transfer where their allegiances lie. If that's the case, I could certainly see Varys getting what Daenerys promised him he would get, which is some dragon fire in the face, and he would not survive that. So whether that's, do I think he's going to survive the Winterfell thing? Yes, I think so. I could certainly see it getting very tight. We saw a shot in the trailer of Varys and Gilly and her baby and a few of the others down there in the crypts hiding out. I could certainly see the army of the dead coming up there and almost getting to them, but then being saved at the last minute. I think he probably will survive that first bit. The people who are likely to die there are more likely to be the fighters rather than him. But I think that, yes, he probably will die later on. Don't think it's definite, because the reason why everyone thinks he's going to die is because Melisandre told him he was going to die. Do not believe everything Melisandre says. She does not get everything right. But I think on this one, she probably is right. I think he probably will die. If only because if you look back at the beginning of season 1, slight digression, but there's a clear line here. At the start of season 1, all of the heads of the major houses at the start of season 1 have now died. And all of the members of the small council at the start of the season 1 have now died, except for Varys. And I think if we're going to have a new way forward, it's going to be without any of those original leaders. And I think, therefore, Varys has to go, just in order to make the whole thing work as a kind of a new start. Just to have the same person being this Master of Whispers or whatever doesn't seem to work very well. LMC saying Dracarys Noir is a fabulous name. Dracarys Noir is a fabulous name. Joe Magician in the chat. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. Good to see you. Matt are saying, oh, great. Are we now going to have a beard gate? Yes, we definitely should do. The whole problem with the pictures on the wall, the cave paintings, I went into that in quite a lot of depth at the time. I think there's a whole issue there that we just do not understand. Is it the same person? Is it a different person? I'm not going to go down there. I got big problems with it. Ms. Colon 85, thank you so much. If you could pick 5 recap episodes to watch before season 8, what would you choose? Oh, this is a very tough question. So one of the directors did this and came up with a list of which episodes to watch beforehand. I tend not to think of things broken down by episode to that extent. What I would suggest is that if you've got time between now and the next 3 days, just do last season, season 7. That'll get you back up to speed. I think I would, there are a few favorite episodes. I love the first couple of episodes of season 1. I love the penultimate episode of most seasons. The Battle of the Bastards is a particular favorite. Actually, Maura Lee, you asked a question about this, about my favorite moments looking back. So this is picking up on that one as well. And I loved, I can't remember the name of it now, but the last episode of season 6, the one when Cersei destroys or blows up the Great Sept. I think that the first 10-15 minutes of that are as good as Game of Thrones has ever got, and I think it was fantastic, and I would happily go back and rewatch that. But in terms of setting yourself up for the season, I think that they have dropped lots of clues in last season as to where they're going to be going in season 8. Incidentally, and I've not gone back and looked, but after season 7 finished, a few days afterwards, maybe a week or so afterwards, I did a predictions video for season 8, which I called something like my ridiculously early predictions for season 8. This was a year and a half, maybe a bit more ago. They certainly hadn't filmed it. They possibly hadn't written it by that point. I would be willing to bet that the majority of the things that I was predicting there for the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 8 are going to be roughly the same things that I've been predicting now. Because they set up things so well at the end of season 7, we know what's going to be happening in the first 2 or 3 episodes. We know that the Golden Company are going to be coming across with Euron. We know that what he's going to be demanding because he's done his part of the bargain. We know what's going to be happening because up north, because we know who's going to be heading up there. We know where there's going to be problems between different people because we know what the Northern Lords told Jon specifically not to do and what he has done. We know that Bran has been saying Jon has to be told about his heritage. We know all of these different things. So if we're looking for clues as to what's going to be happening in season 8, they teed everything up in season 7. So we just need to go back and rewatch that. And that will tell us certainly for the first half of season 8. Let's have a quick, I think I had, maybe I didn't. I thought there was one more super chat. Sheila Baratheon, thank you so much. I'm of the opinion that we focus on Ashara Dane far too much, considering we know nothing about her as a person at all. That being said, A plus H equals M. So yeah, Ashara and Howland equals Mira. I think you're right that we do focus, as a community, we focus on Ashara Dane a huge amount because she's enigmatic, because George R. R. Martin refuses to talk about her, but he confirms that she was moving around at that time, during Robert's Rebellion. Now, I think that she's important in a few different ways at that point, but not therefore necessarily important to the current story. So yeah, we probably focus too much of our attention on her, but that doesn't mean she's not a fascinating character. She's only mentioned something like 12 times or so in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire. And I don't know. She is a fascinating character, and she's been made a fascinating character. But we do have to be aware of the fact that George R. R. Martin has, and I don't think he was specifically talking about Ashara Dane, but he talks about the Boba Fett characters. He says that he has some Boba Fett characters. Boba Fett from Star Wars, the first couple of movies, the second and third movies. What he said was fascinating at the time was that Boba Fett was not a big character in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. He only had a very small amount of screen time, but the fandom loved the character and built him up as this hugely important character, and he wasn't that important, actually. They kind of retrofitted it so he became a lot more important later on in the franchise, or earlier on in the franchise, as it be going chronologically. But he says that he has got some Boba Fett characters who he has just included as quite cool characters, but then the fandom has expanded on them and loves them so much that they have built out this idea that they're much more important. So I don't think he was talking specifically about Ashara Dane, but I think that we do need to be wary of obsessing about some characters who aren't mentioned all that much. Adam Dangersmith saying, hi, have you ever written any fiction yourself? I did many years ago write some short stories, and I wouldn't put it past me to write some more stuff in the future. I consider myself a writer. I write my stuff like The Traveller's Guide and stuff like that. That's me writing stuff. So yes, I will at some point. There are a lot of very talented writers in this community as well, I have to say. Yeah, thank you. So it's a good question. It's definitely something I'm considering doing. In fact, just today, I agreed to do a review for somebody that I collaborated with on Westworld season 2, a guy called Hax Dogma. I don't know whether Hax ever watches any of my stuff on Game of Thrones, but if you've ever come across his videos on Westworld's really clever guy, and I'm really looking forward to reading his story, which is probably going to be his novel, which is coming out in a couple of months' time. Okay, let's get back to a couple of questions from my patrons. James Sidney saying, my question is more of a fun thought experiment. Which of the following scenarios do you think are most to least likely to happen in season 8? The Dead Starks, well, what I won't rank these, but I'll just comment on them as we go through. The Dead Starks in the Crypt will rise. I'm pretty sure we will see something along those lines. I think it's much more likely on the show to be the Night King raising Dead Starks than in the books, where I think that it's much more likely to be the Horn of Winter and the Starks raising them to fight against the Army of the Dead. Melisandre returning to Winterfell with the Fiery Hand. I definitely think she will return to Winterfell. We covered this a little bit earlier. Whether she will come with a Fiery Hand, I don't know. The Fiery Hand, for those who don't know, is kind of like the militant bit of the worshippers of the Lord of Light. They're the guards of their main temple. So the theory is that they might come back. It's possible, but they've not really mentioned them, so it would be a little bit random for them to come across. I think that it's much more likely, as I said, for her to be coming with her idea of how to defeat the Night King. We'll see a mortally wounded character stab themselves with dragonglass to prevent them from rising. I think that's a great idea. I think if they try and work through the logic, that's definitely where they will go with this. Is that if you see a character who dies in the battle, they will not want to be rising again, and that is probably the way that they were going to have to do it. Sounds entirely plausible. Brienne having to kill a whited pod. Oh, don't do this to me, guys. I hope that Brienne doesn't have to kill Pod. I hope Pod survives. Pod's a good guy. Jon and Dany are not present at the Battle of Winterfell. I think this is a fascinating one because we didn't see them in the trailer at the Battle of Winterfell. The implication is that they're both going to be dragon riders. I think that there will be a dragon fight around that time, whether that happens over Winterfell or slightly further away, but I think the Night King will be fighting on top of his undead dragon against the other two. I think that there's a very reasonable chance that Viserion and Rhaegal will kill each other. There's a few precedents for this if you go back to Fire and Blood in the books. So that's entirely possible. People saying Pod will sit on the Iron Throne, Maester Zen. There would be worse endings. And Tim Lewis, will we see 1-1? I think that is somebody that I could definitely see them showing as one of the whites. Going back to this list, Yara or Asha is tongueless. It's possible. They played this up a whole lot more in the books than on the show. The fact that Euron cuts out the tongues of his victims, that is entirely possible. Certainly, I could see it as an ending. It would work for Theon and Yara to be jointly ruling in the Iron Islands, but each of them having their own disability, so they having to work with each other. They've both got ego problems of their own kinds. And I think this would be quite good for them to sort of bring them back down to a level. Let's have a quick flick through. Jack Hurst asks, or says, Brienne has had such an interesting but also under-analysed arc. What do you think the end game has in store for her? Perhaps one of the casualties of the Winterfell battle. So her arc on the show, it's about two things. Firstly, there's the Jaime thing. There has to be some resolution to this. They can't just leave this. He's coming back up north. They won't suddenly get together. But I think that they have to have some moment when it might be wordless, when they recognize the feelings they have one for another. So I think that's the first bit. The second bit is this, her becoming a knight, because she is one of the most, or possibly the most knightly knight there is out there. And she has to be recognized as it. Now, that has sort of come to a completion because she's now there serving Sansa and House Stark. I think, however, I love the idea, whether they'll do it or not, I don't know, but I love the idea that she will survive to the end and that it is her role as the one surviving person who knows what Jaime did way back in the backstory when he killed the Mad King and saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, that she updates his entry in the White Book, which is where the King's Guard's sort of honours are recorded. At the moment, it's really quite pithy, and when he broke his vows and killed the king and was known as Oathbreaker and Kingslayer after that. And it's just like, that's not the truth of it. Yes, it is the truth, but it's not the whole truth. And I love the idea that she, as this person who carries around Oathkeeper, she is the one who updates his entry so that it accurately reflects the entirety of his character. And for that to happen, she has to become the Lord Commander of the Knight Commander of the Kingsguard. So I hope that's where that ends. But it's entirely possible that her personal arc, ends the moment that she has had that moment with Jaime when they can both recognize what's been going on with them. Maura Lee, with only 6. Maura, thank you so much, by the way, for the very generous super chat before we started. Saying, with only 6 episodes in season 8, the show may not have time to answer all of our burning questions about certain characters, their motivations of why they did what they did, etc. What are the top 3 questions about the characters you would like answered the most? Well, the top one is the Night King. I think that I want to know. I want to hear what he's after. I hope it's not just death. I hope that there's an extra layer to it. Revenge, whatever. I think I just need some kind of clear indication that this is what he's after, not just here's somebody coming along slaying humans and that's it. So there has to be something there. In terms of other characters and their motivations, I think we've got most of the show characters, their motivations are reasonably clear. But I do think that the 2 we need to have clear resolution on are Jon and Dany. They are the characters. Out of all of the characters, they are the ones whose arcs are not, the endings of them are not as clear. And I think what I need to know is what, if you're talking about the motivations in certain situations, how Dany will react to what happens in season 8 is one of the things that I'm absolutely looking forward to. The fact that she's actually not the heir when she has thought all this time that she has been, that I'm fascinated to find out. Jon, how he will react to that, how he's going to react to the fact that he's not the person he thought he was. Both of them are going to have this existential crisis, cognitive dissonance about the fact that they are not who they thought they were. So those are the things that I would most want. Jojo Lady Dane saying, did you catch Linda's last super chat? Can you check for me? I think I did, but let me just I assume this is Linda Pursuta. I will quickly flick back up. A little bit of love for Westworld going on there in the chat, I see, as we're just flicking through. I can't see that. Give me just one moment, guys. Let me just quickly refresh this. While I'm doing this, actually, I'll just let people know what's going on my channel as we're going through season 8. So as I said, I'm looking to increase to 2 live streams per week. I'm going to keep this normal slot. This is going to be just me doing largely Q&A. The same slot that I do every single week, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. I'm going to do a second one, 5 p.m. on Sundays, a pre-show before every episode every week. Then I'm going to be doing, as you would expect, a breakdown of every episode, a breakdown of any extra trailers for the next episode that we get, and hopefully at least one other video each week as well. And I'm going to keep going with the well-told tale all through that, my second channel, where I do audio narrations of classic science fiction stories, like stuff like H.P. Lovecraft or Frankenstein or The War of the Worlds. They're all on there at the moment. So Linda Pursuta, I don't think I did answer this one, but thank you for flagging it up for me. So Dany has done a lot of good and also killed many people, along with so many other characters. Will Stannis' words, a good act does not wash out the bad, nor a bad act the good, come into play with our main character's fates? Excellent question, Linda, as usual. So the wonderful thing about these characters is that they are, with the possible exception of a few people like Sam and Gilly or Davos or Brienne, they are not just good characters that we can cheer on because they're they're pure and we love what they're trying to do, but they are multi-layered. They do good things, they do bad things. Dany, I don't think it's going to be... So Stannis, I should probably say, Stannis who's saying this is a very black and white person. And so when he's saying things like good act does not wash out the bad, nor the bad act the good, he's just trying to be very matter of fact about, this is what this person's like, that's what that person's like. I think that George R. R. Martin is wanting us to see characters as multifaceted and not perfect. So characters like Melisandre, she does horrendous things, horrible things, but at the same time she is doing them because she thinks that there is a greater good. She thinks that she is going to save all of humanity. We may disagree with her, but we have to recognize that she's doing the things that she does because she thinks that they are the right things to do. So in terms of how all of that plays into our main characters' fates, I think we are going to be left, certainly in the books, but I hope on the show as well, we are going to be left to draw our own moral conclusions. I don't think it's going to be this kind of karmic world where the bad guys all get what they deserve and the good guys get what they deserve. Broadly speaking, the good characters will survive more often than the bad characters, but there will be, and I've said this for a long, long time, feel free to speculate who this is, but at least one of the characters who we consider to be one of the bad guys will survive. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I think there's a good chance Qyburn will. Otherwise, this is just the good guys win. And I don't think that's where this story goes. So the short answer, Linda, is this is not a kind of like a karmic world where everybody gets what they deserve. Some characters will see it like that, but we shouldn't necessarily just interpret what they're saying as being the truth. Baal the Bod. Hi, good to see you, Gretchen, who was on here a couple of weeks ago, and everyone loved, by the way, so she's definitely going to be coming back on here at some point soon. Saying, what do you think of a Cersei redemption arc? There probably isn't enough time for that to be satisfying on the show, but do you think her book end could be different from her show end? I think this is a great question. So Cersei, the implication of what we've heard is that her sort of goodness kind of waned when her children died. So as the children died out, then her love for the world went out, and so she's then left, after all her children are dead, she's then just left with nothing. She's just looking after herself. And when Jaime abandons her, then it is just her. I think on the show, no, there's not going to be a redemption arc. The only redemption there, I think they've teed up on the show, is if Jaime came back to her and they sort of convinced her not to do something, and she decides not to do it out of love. But I can't see that. They've not teed that up really at all. And I think that there's a fair to middling chance on the show that Jaime won't make it down to King's Landing, I'm sorry to say. In the books, I think he's still the favourite to be the Valonqar figure. On the show, I'm not so sure. So is she going to have a redemptive arc? I think probably not. I think in the books, it's more likely that she has a part in Jaime's redemptive arc. She has already, but the idea that he might reenact something of what he did with the Mad King to prevent her from doing something as well, but this time he gets the praise for doing that. I could certainly see that happening. I would like it, but I've seen no hints in either book or show that that's where it's going. There is time in the books for that to come around, but I don't think, as you say, on the show, they've really teed up the idea that she's going to do anything other than try and cling on to power. Kraken Tacos, thank you so much. Saying Pablo asks, and I love it. I say this every time this happens. I love it when people spot things like questions in the chat and then do a super chat on behalf of it, because there's loads of people here in the chat today, and this just it moves through so quickly that it's really quite hard to keep on top of all of the questions. So if somebody does a super chat, they flash up in a nice bright color and I can see them. Obviously, sometimes I miss them, but I can see them so much more easily. And so I think it's fantastic when people do that on behalf of somebody else's question. Pablo asks, what is Beric Dondarrion's purpose? Who will he kill, or will he save someone like he did in the book? So in the book, he saved Lady, or created Lady Stoneheart. He brought her to life, as it were, with the end of his life. They've not teed up this idea that there's this kind of, that was with like the last kiss, that you can like pass on your life essence to someone. They've not teed that up on the show as a thing that can happen. So I don't think it's likely that they will go down that route, that he's going to somehow magically save someone. They've clearly hinted that the fact that Thoros is dead means that now Beric's on his last life. The only other person we know who can bring people back is Melisandre. So I don't think that's his role. I fear that his role is now just to be the person who follows the Lord of Light, and therefore is giving the Lord of Light answers in the absence of both Thoros, who's now dead, and Melisandre, who's not yet returned. I fear that that is what they've teed him up to do, that he's there just giving these kind of stock. It's the light, it's the fire, this is what the Lord of Light wants us to do, those kinds of things. That seems to be where they're taking it. In terms of his belief that he's been saved for a purpose, I think that probably it'll be something in a battle. I can't see him surviving episode 3. Might not even get that far, but I suspect that he is there to do something cool in a battle to save somebody's life. And I think that's where it's at. As for who, maybe Bran. I think he's somebody who's definitely going to be hunted down in Winterfell by the Night King, and he will have people trying to protect him. LML, thank you again. $6.66. Robert, will you promise to narrate the audiobook of my fantasy novel whenever I write them? You've got some time yet. Yes, I promise to do that. As long as you don't put too many complicated words in there, I would love to. Thank you. Actually, that's quite an honor. Thank you. I would love to. Yeah, I'm all happy and smiling. Thank you. That's a lovely chat, the super chat. Thank you so much for that. And a reminder, guys, that as long as Almel's in the chat, then he's not live streaming. But as soon as I finish, he's about to start. So do go over to his channel once we finish here. Adam Dangersmith saying, hi, Robert. Have you ever written any fiction before? It seems like you'd be a great writer. And what do you do for a day job? So in terms of the first half of this, have you written any fiction before? I did actually answer this one earlier on. Yeah, I've dabbled in the past, short stories and things like that. But in terms of big stuff, no, I haven't. I've done things like NaNoWriMo, if you're at all interested in that. If you know what that is, National Novel Writing Month. So I have done writing, and I think there's a fair chance that I might well do it again. So yeah, that's thank you. People keep on encouraging me to write. I consider myself to be a writer because of what I do with things like The Well Told Tale. But thank you so much. Let's quickly get across. So Cade Norman saying, is there any special connection between Craster's wives and the White Walkers? And if so, will they make any type of appearance? This is a really interesting question. So this is Craster's wives. If you remember, Gilly was one of the wives. The children, the male children they had went off to be the babies that were given over to the White Walkers. The female children grew up to be Craster's wives. So is there a link between them? Well, there is a familial link in that Craster's wives are the mothers of these baby White Walkers. Again, we're faced with this issue of how does this operate? How do the White Walkers actually work? So we don't know is the short answer, and so we can speculate, but the honest answer is we do not know. Will they make any kind of appearance? No, I don't think. On the show, they've certainly not given, other than Gilly, they didn't really sort of flag up any of them, sort of show us them, make them particular characters. But it makes sense that they are a part of the Army of the Dead now, because the Night King seemed to sweep all the way across the north. I do not think that he left Craster and any of the, even after a bit of devastation that happened there before, I do not think that any of the dead there will have been left behind. I think any of the living will have been left behind. I think that the Army of the Dead swept all the way across north of the wall and cleared everything out. I've got another question. I didn't actually note down who this was from on Patreon, so apologies for that. But the question is, did the Night King have an opportunity to take Bran out in season 6, episode 5, when they met in the Weir Net? Night King was able to cause a physical reaction when he marked Bran. This would lead one to believe he could have caused serious bodily harm, possibly even death. I mean, instead of grabbing the arm, he could have stabbed him. Help me to flesh this out. So yeah, he could have done. I think he could have done more damage, but what he was doing was a very clear marking of him. And as we found out straight afterwards, that marking of Bran was what allowed the White Walkers to cross over the magical barrier and into Bloodraven's cave. So that was why he did that. And if he just killed him there, then presumably that wouldn't have worked. So what he was doing was actually using Bran to get in. Bran escaped. He wasn't to know that Bran was going to escape. He clearly didn't want him to escape. He was just, but at that time, if he'd killed Bran, then he wouldn't have got access to the cave, and he wanted to get access to the cave. Sheila Brathian, thank you for the super chats. Do you have any plans for a cast with ideas of Ice and Fire? He's been kind of missing in action. I will again. He's been on a couple of times here, actually, doing a live stream. So yeah, I will definitely have him on again. I've got no plans as of this moment. Have been in contact with him recently, but no, we haven't got anything lined up particularly. But I'm sure we will again at some point in the future. But yeah, so I didn't realise he was missing in action. I have to admit I hadn't spotted that. He's certainly been on Twitter, so I don't think there's a problem there. Let's go to, I've got 4 or 5 more questions, I think, over from my patrons. I'm going to try and round this off within the 2 hours. And as I don't have LML here, then I think there's a good chance that I might be able to do that. So, sorry, LML. Torsten D saying, I'm almost done with reading the books for the first time, perfectly in time for season 8. Great. I'm really pleased. I'm very jealous of people reading the books for the first time. One thing that really touched me in the books was the Tisha story. What do you think is the payoff for the phrase "where whores go," if any? Now, this is a book question. The situation was sort of touched on in the show. It's a bit of backstory for Tyrion, but it's a tragic tale in itself in the books. So Tyrion married, there's more to this story, but Tyrion married when he was much younger, and then Tywin decided that this wasn't the right match, And there was this horrific scene that Tyrion remembers, where Tywin, to, it would appear, try and teach Tyrion a lesson, basically had Tisha, this woman that he married, gang raped by lots of the Lannister soldiers and also by Tyrion. It's a horrific memory that Tyrion has. He seems to regret it, but also very much own up to his actions in it. Why that's mentioned is because this is what Tyrion in the books is confronting Tywin about when he shoots him. And so Tywin's there. If you remember the scene, he's sat on the loo. Tyrion comes at him with the crossbow. And the thing that Tyrion says is, if you say the word whore again, because Tywin's goading him, talking about Tyrion and all his whores, then if you say that word again, then I will pull the trigger. And they have this conversation, and Tyrion says, what happened to Tisha? What did you do with her afterwards? Because you could tell something in him, this was his first real love, and this really impacted him. So, well, what happened? And he pushes Tywin, and eventually and he says, where did she go? And Tywin says, wherever whores go. And that's what caused Tyrion to pull the trigger and to kill his father. So those were actually Tywin's last words, not any we sometimes think about you're no son of mine and things like that. That's not his words. In the books, it's very clear his last words were wherever whores go. And in the books, Tyrion thinks about this a lot. He asks this question, where do whores go? As if this is some kind of riddle. Tywin, it seems, was just being quite dismissive. Well, I don't know where she went, wherever whores go. That seems to be what he was saying. But Tyrion treats it as some kind of riddle. And he not only is asking himself the question, but he asks people when he's on his travels, when he goes through, because immediately after that, obviously, he goes off to Essos and he stops off at various cities, and he's asking people as he passes in different languages, in trying in broken, his poor understanding of different languages, trying to ask people where do whores go, and he can't get this idea out of his head. So the idea, and this is a great question from Torsten, the idea that there is a payoff for this is fascinating, because yes, there has to be. It's literally, I didn't count, but it's something like 8, 9, 10 different times he says this phrase as he's going around. He's asking people about it. There has to be something that this leads up to. I think that within his character, this has to lead out to him being at peace with himself. He's not at peace with himself. And we see this in the books very clearly all through this period. In the books we've left off, he's just outside Meereen, was where we last sort of seeing him. And he's clearly not happy with himself and who he is. And so where this has to lead up to is him being okay with himself and with his past, in a way, have come to terms with it. In terms of the actual where is Tisha, I think we will get an answer. I think George R. R. Martin has hinted at that, I think, in a couple of interviews. I wonder whether she might be, I didn't come up with this, but I've sort of read a few different sort of people who've speculated. There's a courtesan in Braavos who is called, I think, the Sailor's Wife. And there's a couple of hints there that are, well, a couple of things that are intriguing. First of all, she speaks fluent Westerosi, which in Braavos is a little bit rare, actually without an accent, as if she comes from somewhere in Westeros. Secondly, she only sleeps with people who marry her in this kind of ceremony, which harks back, it would seem, to this kind of idea with Tyrion. And thirdly, she seems to have a child who has golden hair, very Lannistery, and has been given the name Lana. All of that kind of ties up. None of it is evidence, but all of it kind of hints that perhaps that's who it might be. So possibly, obviously, Bravos is a place that we are going to see more of in the next book. So if we're going to find out anywhere, then that's my best guess at the moment. Warrior Girl over on Patreon says, I'm curious if it is just a show thing, or does Dany mention in the books too that she knows all about her eldest brother, the prince ripping the kingdom apart for true love? And whatever happened to the 6 miniseries on houses you're doing with Gemma from Secret of the Citadel? Well, to answer the second bit, the stuff I was doing with Gemma, we've done 4 of the videos. We've got a couple more to do. I think we were going to do House Martell on my channel, and I can't remember now. Gemma had another one as well. We are going to do them. I was talking to her about this literally yesterday. We haven't forgotten. It's just that we ran out of time pre-season. So what we've said is that if we get a moment during the busyness of the season and we just need to chat to each other about something that isn't stuff that's happening in season 8, then we will do that. We will just spend a bit of time. We can do it reasonably quickly. We have not forgotten. We are going to come back to it. So do not worry. That series is going to finish off. We just simply ran out of time, I'm afraid. Just a life. But in terms of the first part, Dany, does Dany know about Rhaegar? This is the short answer is she knows some things about Rhaegar. There's a bit that I will probably misquote this, where she talks about Prince Rhaegar loving his Lady Lyanna and thousands died for it. So she's heard of the story, she knows of the story, but she almost all the time is asking people, particularly Barristan, what was Rhaegar like? And she's asking these questions, and also Jorah as well. She's asking about, what was he like? Tell me about what was going on. All these kinds of things. She clearly feels that she needs to know more. She feels that she doesn't know enough. She certainly doesn't know about the character. All she knows is the things that Viserys told her. And pardon me, Viserys seems to have given her a very glamorized version that he was the greatest fighter in the land. That he was going to be the next king. He was going to be a wonderful king, etc., etc., etc. And then the usurper came and took it all away. So that seems to be what she's been told, and she's just picking up from people who do know what it was like. She's trying to pick together a few of the extra details. One of the things, if you actually do a search for things that when the conversations between Barristan Selmy and Dany, the amount of times when Barristan Selmy seems about to say something really fascinating and then something happens to prevent him actually saying it. It's very frustrating. George R. R. Martin knows that Barristan Selmy knows a lot, and he doesn't want him to be giving out too much information at this stage. So, yeah, the short answer is she knows some things, but in the books, she doesn't understand the character. Linda Prosuta, thank you. Another super chat that's very generous. Do you think we'll finally hear the honeycomb and the jackass joke in the show? 3rd time's a charm. I hope so. I really do hope so. For those who haven't been paying close attention, Tyrion has twice started telling a joke about honeycomb and the jackass, and twice got interrupted and never managed to finish it. I think that they will tell us the end to the joke in season 8. I hope they do. And I wish I did. I did see somebody who came up with a really good answer to this that actually really worked, and I'm trying to remember what the punchline was. if I remember it, I will put it on Twitter, because there is somebody who has come up with what I'm convinced is a better punchline than whatever it was that Tyrion was about to come up with. So yeah, I hope we do. It's possible that they don't show it, but it depends whether we have these kind of more light-hearted moments. I think season 8 promises to be quite intense. I don't know how many kind of light-hearted moments we're going to be getting, and we need a few of them. I wonder, just thinking about the series, episodes 1 to 3, we know roughly what's happening. I do wonder whether episode 4 might be a bit quieter, or possibly episode 5, before we have the final showdown at the end. I think at some point they're going to slow the pace, and something around, say, episode 4 was that does seem to work for me as a slightly slower pace. Everybody just gathering their breath again before the final push. I've got 2 or 3 more questions, guys. I'm going to go for about another 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And now is the time, if you've got any more questions, to drop them down into the chat, and I'll try and get to them. A little bit of conversation about Tyrion in the last couple of seasons. Yeah, I think Tyrion is, out of all of the characters, possibly Littlefinger as well, he is the one I think has been on the show hurt the most by not having George R.R. Martin's dialogue. George R.R. Martin is clearly a fantastic writer, and the fact that they could use his words through the first few seasons, Tyrion's character is so much based around wordplay, and the moment you get rid of the incredibly clever wordplay that he uses, then he's slightly diminished as a character, and that, I think, is part of the reason why it's not worked so well for Tyrion in the last couple of seasons. Wonderdog26 Art Girl, Shae once told Tyrion that she would protect him by taking off someone's face. Is she a faceless man? I don't think so. I think this, you have to ask, with all of these, is so-and-so a faceless man? Faceless men don't tend to just wander around the countryside just chatting to interesting people. They are hired to do a job, and then they do it. That is what they're doing. So for Shae to be a faceless man, you have to say, well, who hired her to kill who? And that, I think, is the bit that I've not seen any clear understanding of. All the people who seem to be dying around her, we know who killed them. Even people like Tywin, there are implications that he might have been poisoned, but I think that Oberyn Martell is a much more likely person to be doing that, rather than just someone hiring the faceless men. So I think I see no evidence for it. Always happy to hear more different evidence, but I personally, I can't see any evidence that she was indeed a faceless man. Kaylee B saying, I was wondering if you have heard the theory that not only the direwolves' names, but also their fates are tied to the Stark children. So while Sansa has become a lady to match her wolf's name, could she possibly die in the place of Arya like her wolf did? So I think I haven't heard of it. This is the first I've heard of this theory, but I think that it's the name that seems to be the clearest link. In terms of the fate of the wolf equaling the fate of the person, for me, that slightly pushes it a little bit too far, because then you say, so, okay, Robb and Grey Wind's fate, it was the same. They both got killed at the same place, and then obviously they sort of put them together in that horrible wolf's head thing. Rickon and Shaggy Dog, again, they both sort of died at the same sort of time. It doesn't, there's no meaning there. They just happened to die at the same sort of time. I don't think that the fate of individual dogs therefore means huge amounts. So Arya's direwolf, her fate appears to be leading a whole series of this big wolf pack. That does kind of hark back to Nymeria, the warrior queen who led the Rhoynar across from their homeland into Dawn. There's a little bit there, but no, I think the short answer is that there's not as strong a link as there clearly is between the names of the direwolves and the fates of their owners. I like the idea, I like the thinking, but there's not enough of a link between all of the different wolves and their owners for that to actually work for me. Maura Lee saying, looking back at past seasons, this is the last question I've got from my patrons, by the way, guys. So after this, I will just dip into a couple of questions from the chat before we finish off. Maura Lee saying, looking back at past seasons, name some of the highlights for you where you felt the show really got it spot on. So I think this is a great one to finish off with from my patrons. In terms of when the show got it spot on, I think season 1, absolutely. I know that other people prefer other seasons, but for me, season 1, they just got it right. They got the feel right. They got the characters right. The whole thing was just perfect. It was very sleek, very slick, but because they were largely just taking it scene for scene, they had to take some out, obviously add in a couple of little bits, but broadly speaking, when they took it scene from the book, it was a fantastic adaptation. I loved it. I've already talked about a couple of the episodes that I really loved. The last episode of season 6, Battle of the Bastards Moor, I agree completely. I think that the way that they handled the actual battle was astonishing in showing how visceral and random it is at eye level. There was about a 20-second section when you get Jon there in the middle of a battle and he's fighting somebody, and then somebody's about to hit him, and then they get knocked over by a horse, and then somebody else slips over here, and you just see the randomness of war and the horror of it, and it's it's incredibly good TV. The way that they don't have to tell us that war is horrific. They can just show us quite how horrific war is. So that, I think, was absolutely brilliant. But generally, in terms of sort of characters or scenes, the bit, I talked about this a couple of episodes ago, actually, when somebody was asking a question about it. The bit that they've added in that I thought worked the best was when there was that scene between Tywin and Arya way back in, I think, season 2 or something like that, at Harrenhal. I thought that worked. That was a beautiful little scene. It showed us a lot about both of the characters, and I think that I love that. So sometimes I think the showrunners, when they add stuff in, works absolutely perfectly. But yeah, season 1, and I think a couple of episodes in season 6, I think were what really worked for me. Jojo Lady Dane pointing at 820 people watching. That's amazing. Say, give yourself a massive pat on the back, Robert, and tell them to stay tuned for LML, please. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to answer a couple more questions before going. But yes, after this, do check out Lucifer Means Lightbringer. I think, Jojo, you're going to be heading over and modding for him, being a mod over there as well. So thank you so much. Jojo and my other moderators do fantastic work across the piece within this community. They don't just moderate for me, they do it for many people. So thank you so much. And yes, please do go. I highly recommend LML's live streams. I think I have got another. Oh, yeah. So Donald Peoples, thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Robert. LML, see you soon. Yeah, again. Well, People are reminding me. I do not need to remind you. So, guys, what I will just round off by saying then is, if I can find any more questions, a quick question. People saying, I really like that chaos is a ladder scene. Despite this, I felt it fit Littlefinger's character really well. I agree. It was a fantastic little bit. Totally agree. Space Wolf, riff free or die, says, I totally agree with you about season 1. Good, excellent. Desmond Lawrence saying, sorry for hounding you with this question. Not at all, don't worry about it. But are people sure that the Night King will be defeated at Winterfell in or about episode 3? Well, nobody's sure. I don't deal with spoilers here. I've not seen any spoilers about this. In fact, I would say that the showrunners have done an exceptional job of making sure that no spoilers come out. I think they've done really well this year. It is very clear that season 3, this isn't a spoiler, there's going to be a big battle at Winterfell. That has to end in one of two ways. Either the Night King is victorious and then keeps on moving south, which is entirely possible, or the Night King is somehow defeated. Now, if the Night King keeps on coming south, then he will have to die at some point. I do not think that he is going to be the last baddie, if that's the right word, to fall. I think that will be Cersei along with Euron. I think that is the last thing that's going to happen. I think it's probable that the Night King, the Armored Dead, will be dealt with at Winterfell in episode 3, and then episodes 4 to 6 are going to be focused more on the final battles down in the south. But that's not 100%. It's entirely possible as well that they could go with the idea that they just have to evacuate Winterfell and everybody's just charging down south, fleeing before the might of the Army of the Dead. But at some point, they have to deal with the Army of the Dead, and I think that happens before the finale. So no, there's no certainty there. They've done a fantastic job of hiding it from us, but I think that is the most likely answer. And with that, guys, I am going to round up. Do tune in this Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That's 4 hours before Game of Thrones airs, Game of Thrones episode 1. Really excited. So tune in here. We'll be doing a live stream. I will have a live stream guest. Don't know who that is yet because I have completely failed to ask people. But I'll have a guest in for that one, and we'll be looking forward to episode 1. If you are at all interested in looking at other live streams that I've done with other creators, other collaborators, then there should be a link appearing somewhere up here in a moment. If you're at all interested in supporting the channel, getting access to some exclusive benefits, then please check out my Patreon page, and there's a link to that coming up somewhere around here in a moment. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for the chat. Fantastic chat. Really, really great questions today, and I shall see you again soon. Take care.